What's happening, Hardscapers? Let's talk about dumb retaining wall mistakes that will cause failure. Let's get into this. We're going to be going through 10 dumb retaining wall mistakes that will cause failure of your retaining walls, with a bonus one at the very end that we'll also touch on. And this is specifically for segmental retaining walls. There are several different wall structures that are possible, but for us, we specifically install segmental retaining walls. These are walls built of wall blocks that interlock or are segments of that wall that create a rigid but flexible structure. And you'll notice after the last video of the 5 dumb interlocking paver installation mistakes that will cause failure, we've doubled that for retaining walls just because retaining walls are such an intricate structure and there's so many different aspects to building a retaining wall that make it more complex, which allows for many more things to go wrong in that structure, especially since it's designed to hold back something and it's constantly experiencing force that it needs to withstand. And unfortunately, unlike interlocking concrete pavement, for us, segmental retaining walls can't just be picked up and put back into place, much like fixing interlocking concrete pavement would. If there's a problem with a retaining wall, we're likely tearing the whole thing down and starting from scratch. But here are the 10 dumb retaining wall mistakes that will cause failure, starting with number 1, the lack of base depth. Much like our interlocking concrete pavement video, this might be something that somebody tries to excavate less so that they don't have to dispose of that material and don't have to bring in more material like gravel to fill that area so that they can save a little bit of money, but that's going to cost you in the long run. For us in Toronto, we're doing a 6 to 8 inch base for our retaining walls. That's just for us specifically in our frost cycles that we experience. It allows for adequate drainage and to provide a solid foundation. Number 2 is improper base material. This I don't see a whole lot of, but it is important to note that you're either looking at a dense graded base, open graded base, or a concrete base for your segmental retaining wall. I have seen it with stone dust, and you do not want to use stone dust that's a 1/4 inch down to fines, chipped stone. It's bad, don't use it. It acts like a sponge, holds on to water, which means when that water freezes in the winter, it's going to heave and cause problems. Don't use it. Which brings us to number 3, and that's compaction. Making sure you have adequate compaction of your subgrade as well as your base material. Using an appropriate compactor for that and not a small one. Make sure you have one that is large enough to be able to compact the lifts or the height of gravel that you're installing at one time before compacting. Number 4 is no base extension, and this is a minimum of 6 inches in front of your wall and a minimum of 12 inches behind your wall, or 24 inches from the face of your wall to the back of the trench for the drainage area. These base extensions are crucial to provide a solid footing for your wall block. If the wall block is installed on the edge of your base material, that earth beyond the wall block will begin to settle and cause issues, and eventually that wall will start to lean forward. And behind the wall, same thing, but also to make room for our drainage material in behind the wall, which is crucial. And since we're talking about that, might as well continue with number 5, and that is our drainage, which includes a perforated pipe in behind the wall. And this placement does depend whether you're using a dense graded base or an open graded base. Open graded just means that there's no fines in it, so we're going to want to place that drainage pipe lower in our base to capture any water and move it out of the system. If we're using a dense graded base, we're putting it elevated on top of that base, once again, to move water out of that system. Incredibly important, because any water that gets in behind our wall and starts to fill up, we want to make sure that that is out of our system so we're not putting additional pressure on our wall. We also want drainage pathways in the face of the walls every 25 linear feet on that wall so that water can work its way out. And if any of these terms or a topic that I bring up throughout this video raise questions with you, or you have a question about them, we actually have videos on every single one of these topics, from different base materials, aggregates, preparing the base for your retaining wall, building up a retaining wall. Every single one of these topics has their own video. The links will be in the description below. And along with that drainage is number 6, and that is our backfill. Our backfill material should be a clean stone, an open graded stone. We use 3/4 inch clear stone. Open or clear or clean, it just means that there's no fines in it. So that water is going to move its way right through that. So any incidental rain will work its way through that system to our drainage pipe and out from behind the wall. So you're not getting additional hydrostatic pressure, or in the winter times that water freezing and putting additional pressure on your wall. This material gets backfilled and compacted behind your wall as you install your wall up. You don't want to leave it to the very end once the wall has already been built up. You want to build it in tandem with building up your wall. But we also want to make sure before we start building our wall, number 7 is our buried courses. There's a lot of factors that will affect this, but typically about 6 inches for your embedded course, or the course of wall below your actual final grade, so it doesn't even show. This ensures that your wall is not going to kick out with pressure and just gives added stability. But once again, that can be affected by how high you're building the wall, how steep the slope is in front of the wall, what kind of soil you're building your wall on. Lots of different things will affect this, and typically any retaining wall over 36 inches is going to need to be outside engineered before you start building it, so you'll get that information with that. Anything under 36 inches, you can typically refer to a manufacturer's drawing, because any segmental retaining wall manufacturer should have drawings on how to install the wall based on how high you're going to build that wall. Which brings me to my next point, is following those engineered drawings. They're there for a reason, but especially making sure that you can use that specific block that you've chosen in your specific application. For example, there's some wall blocks that can't be built beyond 2 feet high. Or maybe you can, you just need to build in a stagger or a batter on that wall, where that wall, as it gets built up, actually sets back each block so it's not a 90-degree wall. Instead, it would have a slight angle on it going into the slope. And also, depending on the height, maybe you need geogrid in certain layers on that wall. Once again, many different things to consider with these drawings, but just make sure you refer to them and see if that wall block is appropriate for your application and follow that drawing. I mentioned geogrid. My next point is going to be talking about geotextiles and geogrid. Use a geotextile to separate your subgrade from your base material before you start building. And again, at the very top of your drainage area, so any topsoil that you put on top of there is not going to work its way down the clear stone of your drainage area. Some people believe that you should, or some people believe that you should not install it on the back end of your drainage area working its way up. We've done it both ways, but that's controversial. Some people will think that this non-woven geotextile will clog up eventually and put more pressure on your wall from behind. And on the opposing side, some people believe that the soil in behind will move into the clear stone backfill and contaminate that. But you will want to use uniaxial geogrid. This is geogrid that has strength in one direction, and you want to install that properly, because there's only one way that you can install this in that one direction on your retaining wall. This gets sandwiched in between layers of the wall block as you install it and gets stretched out to a specified length. Once again, refer to that manufacturer's guideline as to how long that length is, as well as where it needs to be placed in that wall on specified rows in their engineered drawings. The next one is staggering your joints. They need to be staggered at least 1/3 of the block. I've seen retaining walls built where the wall blocks are just stacked one on top of the other. In order to get the strength and the interlock of these segmental retaining wall systems, you want to make sure that each block course is staggered at least 1/3 of that wall block from one course to the next. And finally, the bonus one is locking mechanisms or adhesive. If your retaining wall has locking mechanisms, use them. Sometimes they're built into the wall, sometimes they're additional pieces that you need to put into place for that wall to lock in together. You do not have to use adhesive with a segmental retaining wall if there are these locking mechanisms in place. Until you get to the caps, then you'd want to glue those. Going back to the beginning of the video, segmental retaining walls are meant to be rigid but flexible systems, moving with the earth and interlocking with one another to provide strength, so you don't need that adhesive as long as there are those locking mechanisms in place. And those are the 10 dumb retaining wall mistakes that will cause failure in your retaining wall. Though that last one, it's not going to cause failure if you do use adhesive, it's fine, it's just a little bit of a waste.